She said I was trouble again. The other one, the one with the laugh that could restart a stopped heart, said, "That's half the fun." They weren't talking about me, not really. They were talking about a man in a movie or a story one of them had heard. But Clara's eyes, the color of aged whiskey in the low light, slid to me as she said it. Just a flicker, a spark thrown carelessly from a fire. It was enough to catch the dry tinder of my silence. I was supposed to be tending the bar at this fundraiser, polishing glasses, keeping the ice bin full. A ghost in a white shirt and black vest. But I'd been motionless for a full minute, a clean highball glass trapped in the damp cloth in my hand, watching her. Clara wasn't like the other patrons. She didn't clutch her wine glass like a lifeline or laugh too loudly to prove she was having a good time. She stood with a stillness that seemed to draw the noise and light of the room into her orbit, quieting it. She was in a simple, dark blue dress that left her shoulders bare, and the sight of that exposed skin, smooth, showing the fine map of a life lived, made my throat feel tight. Her friend was called away, and suddenly, the pocket of space around the end of the bar was just hers. And mine. She turned fully, resting an elbow on the polished wood. "I think I'm neglecting my drink." Her voice was a low, warm register that felt like a physical touch. "The ice has melted," I said, my own voice rough from disuse. I gestured to her glass with my chin. "It's just colored water now." A small smile touched her lips. A metaphor for the evening, perhaps. She pushed the glass an inch toward me. "Can you fix it?" I took the glass. Our fingers didn't touch, but the air between them crackled with the nearness. I made her a new one, my movements deliberate, conscious of her gaze on my hands. When I set it down before her, a fresh lime wedge perched on the rim. She didn't reach for it immediately. "You watch," she said, not as an accusation, but as a simple, devastating statement of fact. Most people just see. The air left my lungs. I had to grip the edge of the bar. "You have no idea," I wanted to say. "I see the tiny lines at the corners of your eyes when you almost smile. I see the way you hold your own wrist when you're listening, a self-contained anchor. I see the weight in you, a beautiful, sorrowful weight." Instead, I said, "It's a more interesting view from here." She held my gaze then, and the hum of the party faded into a distant radio signal. It was an overly long eye contact, the kind that crosses a line, the kind that feels like stepping off a ledge. In the depths of her eyes, I saw not the polished confidence of the woman in the blue dress, but a flicker of something else, something raw and just as laid bare as I was. Then, a man's hand, large and ringed, clapped down on the bar between us. "Two Macallans, neat, and look alive, son." The spell shattered. Clara's eyes dropped, her posture shifting back into the graceful, untouchable woman from before. But as I turned to get the whiskey, I felt the heat of her gaze on my back, a brand. And I knew, with a certainty that felt like fate, that the trouble hadn't even begun. The fundraiser bled into a quieter, more dangerous hour. The crowd thinned, leaving behind the ghosts of their laughter and the scent of perfume and whiskey. I was breaking down my station, the clink of glassware the only sound in the now hushed space. I thought she'd left, but then I felt her. A shift in the air, a presence at my shoulder. "You're still here," I said, not turning around. "I forgot my wrap." Her voice was closer than I expected. I finally glanced at her. She was holding a silvery gray pashmina, but she made no move to leave. She just stood there, watching me wipe down the already clean wood. I could feel the heat of her body, could smell the faint, clean scent of her soap beneath the evening's perfume. "You're very good at that," she said. The silence. My ex-wife called it brooding. The words were out before I could stop them. A raw piece of my past laid bare. Said it was like living with a closed door. Clara didn't offer pity. She just absorbed it, her head tilting. "How old are you?" 27. A slow nod. "You have the eyes of someone much older." "And you?" I said, the boldness a low thrum in my blood. "Have the eyes of someone who's been told she has to be graceful about her loneliness." She didn't deny it. She just looked down, her fingers tracing the pattern on the bar. My husband, my late husband, he was 20 years my senior. Everyone saw a beautiful, tragic pairing. No one saw the quiet. Her confession hung between us, a shared vulnerability. This was the risk, the chasm between us. My life was a mess I'd barely started. Hers was a story already written in loss. I reached for a glass near her elbow. Her hand was there, resting on the wood. My fingers brushed the back of her wrist. A whisper of a touch, accidental and entirely deliberate. Her breath hitched a tiny, sharp intake. We both froze. The touch lasted less than a second, but the imprint of her skin on mine was a brand. I could feel the fine bones of her wrist, the softness. She didn't pull away. She turned her hand over, just slightly, a silent, breathtaking invitation. My gaze lifted from our almost joined hands to her face. Her lips were parted, her composure finally, gloriously fractured. The air was so thick with unspoken electricity it was a miracle the lights didn't flicker. In the profound silence of the empty hall, all that existed was the scant inch of charged space between my fingers and her palm. A door clicked shut somewhere in the distant lobby. The sound was a bucket of cold water. Clara's hand retreated, curling into a fist at her side. I snatched my own back, the phantom heat of her skin screaming. We took a step apart, the space between us suddenly a canyon. "Clara? You still in here?" A woman's voice called out, her friend from earlier, the one with the laugh. "Just leaving, Sarah." Clara's reply was smooth, practiced, but her eyes were wide, locked on mine. A storm of panic and something else, something wild. We could hear Sarah's heels clicking closer, a steady, approaching metronome. There was nowhere to go. We were standing in the open. In a single, desperate motion, I grabbed a stack of dirty trays and stepped around the end of the bar, putting myself directly in Clara's path just as Sarah appeared in the arched doorway. To Sarah, it would look like a waiter was politely letting a guest pass. But we were trapped in the narrow space between the bar stools and the counter. My front was inches from her side. The scent of her, that clean soap and evening musk, filled my senses. I could feel the warmth radiating from her bare shoulder. I held my breath. Sarah paused in the doorway. "There you are. I've been looking all over. James is getting the car." "I was just thanking the staff," Clara said, her voice remarkably steady, though I saw the frantic pulse at the base of her throat. Sarah's gaze flickered over me, a dismissive glance. "Very conscientious of you. Come on, it's freezing out there." She turned and walked away, her footsteps receding. We didn't move. The danger had passed, but a new, more potent one took its place. The air was thick with our shared, forbidden secret. Clara turned her head slightly, her cheek almost brushing the lapel of my shirt. Her eyes were dark pools of conflict. "This is," she whispered, the word a confession. "Impossible. Reckless. Wrong." "I know," I breathed back. Her gaze dropped to my mouth. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I leaned in just a fraction, drawn by an invisible wire. I could feel the whisper of her breath on my lips. This was it. The line was right here. But she didn't close the distance. Instead, her hand came up, and her fingers, trembling slightly, brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. The touch was so intimate, so unbearably tender. It stole the air from my lungs. It was a confession and a farewell all at once. Then, she was gone, slipping past me, the silk of her dress whispering against my trousers. She didn't look back. I stood there, in the silence she left behind, my skin burning where her fingers had been, the ghost of her breath still on my lips. We were further apart than ever, and yet, I had never felt so completely, ruinously bound to another person. 3 days. I counted the hours, each one a dull ache. The memory of her touch on my forehead was a brand. I told myself it was a mistake, a moment of weakness for a grieving woman. I told myself to stay away. Couldn't. I found out where she lived through a discarded guest list I had no business keeping. I stood across the street from her brownstone in the drizzling rain, my hands shoved in my pockets, water dripping from my hair. I was proving her right. I was trouble. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to see the light in her window, to know she was real. The front door opened. She stood there, wrapped in a cream-colored cardigan, holding a small trash bag. She froze when she saw me, her body going still. She didn't look surprised. She looked resigned, as if she'd been expecting this, dreading it, waiting for it. I crossed the street, the rain of fine mist between us. I stopped at the bottom of her steps. "Clara, you're soaked," she said, her voice quiet, stripped of its earlier polish. "I couldn't stop thinking," I said, the words raw, "about the way you looked at me, like you saw something, like you saw me." A tremor went through her. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." I took a step up, then another. I was close enough now to see the flecks of green in her whiskey-colored eyes, to see the way her lips parted. "Tell me to leave." She said nothing. Her chest rose and fell in a shallow, rapid rhythm. "I'm 27. I work in a bar. My life is a blueprint with no lines on it yet." I was confessing everything, building the case against myself. "And you're the most real thing I've ever seen." Her hand came up, slow, hesitant. Her fingers brushed the wet hair from my temple, a mirror of her gesture from the other night. But this time her touch lingered, her thumb tracing the line of my eyebrow. It was an answer. My control snapped. I closed the last inch between us. My hand came up to cradle her jaw, my thumb stroking her cheek. Her skin was impossibly soft. She leaned into the touch, a small, broken sound escaping her lips, her eyes fluttering shut. Her other hand came up to grip my wrist, not to pull me away, but to anchor herself. The rain pattered softly on the leaves around us. The world had shrunk to this. The feel of her skin under my hand, the heat of her body so close to mine, the shared breath hanging in the damp air. My gaze dropped to her mouth. "Leo," she whispered, a plea and a surrender. I leaned in, my lips a breath from hers. The space between us was a heartbeat, a promise, a point of no return. And then her front door, which had been left ajar, swung open with a creak. The open door revealed not a person, but the empty, well-lit hallway of her home. A simple gust of wind. The ordinary sound of the hinge was a gunshot to the charged silence between us. We sprang apart. The spell was shattered, replaced by a frantic, raw panic. Clara's hand flew to her lips, as if she could physically capture the kiss that had almost happened. "I have to go," she breathed, her voice trembling. She took a step back, toward the safety of her house, but her eyes were still locked on me, wide with a terror that had nothing to do with being seen and everything to do with what she'd almost done, what she'd wanted to do. "Clara, wait." "No, Leo. You were right. You shouldn't be here." She hugged herself, the cardigan tightening around her. I can't be the person who ruins you." The word hung in the damp air. "Ruins. You're not ruining me, aren't I?" A bitter, sad laugh escaped her. "What do you think this is? A romance? It's a detour. For both of us. You're lost after your divorce, and I'm—" She gestured vaguely at the beautiful, empty house behind her. "I'm a ghost in my own life, and we're using each other to feel something." Her confession was a brutal, unexpected flip. It wasn't about age or society. It was about the deeper, more terrifying risk of two broken people using each other as a temporary salve. The safe distance of attraction was gone, replaced by the raw, risky truth of emotional dependency. I moved before I could think, closing the distance she'd created. I didn't touch her, but I stood so close I could feel the heat from her body, could see the unshed tears glistening in her eyes. "You think I don't know what this is?" My voice was low, rough. "You think I'm some kid who doesn't know the difference between a distraction and this?" I gestured between us, the space crackling. "I've been distracted. This is the only thing that's felt real in years." Her resolve fractured. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. I watched it fall, the sight of it undoing me more completely than any touch. My hand lifted, and with a tenderness that felt like a vow, I brushed the tear away with my thumb. My fingers lingered on her jaw, and she leaned into the touch, her eyes closing, a silent surrender. "You're not ruining me?" I whispered, my lips close to her ear. "You're the only thing that makes sense." She was silent for a long moment, her breath warm against my neck. Then, her hand came up and covered mine where it held her face. Her fingers laced through mine, tight, almost desperate. She opened her eyes, and the decision was there, clear and terrifying. "Come inside," she said. The click of her front door shutting was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It sealed us in a tomb of her own making, a beautiful silent space filled with books and soft lamplight and the ghost of her late husband. We didn't move from the foyer. The rain-streaked windows made the outside world a blur, leaving only us in sharp, terrifying focus. "This is a mistake," she whispered, but she was backing me against the door, her body not touching mine, but so close I could feel the warmth of her through my wet clothes. "I know," I said, my voice gravel. Her hands came up and flattened against my chest, over my pounding heart. She wasn't pushing me away. She was feeling the frantic, animal rhythm of me. Her head was bowed, her forehead almost resting on my shoulder. "I'm so tired of being the graceful widow," she murmured into the damp fabric of my shirt. "I'm tired of being careful." My hands found her hips, my grip firm, anchoring us both. "Then stop." She lifted her head. Her eyes were stripped bare of all pretense, filled with a decade's-deep weariness and a hunger that mirrored my own. This was the truth, the core of her. Not the poised woman from the bar, but this raw, real, and reaching for something she knew she shouldn't want. "I look at you," she said, her voice trembling, "and I don't see a boy. I see a man who knows what it is to be broken. And that is the most dangerous thing of all." It was the final confession, the last barrier gone. I didn't kiss her. Not yet. I brought one hand up and cupped the back of her neck, my thumb stroking the delicate skin beneath her ear. She shuddered, her eyes fluttering closed, leaning into the touch as if she'd been starved for it. We stood like that for a long moment, breathing each other's air, the silent house bearing witness. It was a choice, a decision made not in a frantic rush, but in the quiet, seismic shift of two people deciding to be seen, fully and completely, in their ruin. When our lips finally met, it was not a collision, but a surrender. It was slow, deep, and heartbreakingly tender. A conversation of sighs and softness, an answer to every unspoken question that had hung between us since the moment her eyes first found mine across a crowded room. When we finally broke apart, breathless, her forehead rested against mine. There were no more words. The conflict was resolved. They had chosen each other, fully aware of the beautiful, complicated mess they were stepping into. In the quiet stillness of her hallway, they simply held one another, two flawed puzzle pieces who had finally, against all odds, clicked into place. The rain had softened to a gentle patter against the windows, the world outside her brownstone hushed and forgiving. We were on her sofa, the lamps casting a warm, honeyed glow. The space between us, once a charged and impossible chasm, was now gone. I sat with my back against the armrest, and she leaned into me, her head nestled in the hollow of my shoulder, my arm wrapped around her. Her fingers traced idle patterns on the worn fabric of my t-shirt, one of her late husband's. I realized with a quiet pang that wasn't jealousy, but respect. We were quiet, the silence now a comfortable, shared thing, no longer filled with everything we were afraid to say. "I was so scared," she whispered into the quiet, her voice muffled against my chest. "Not of you, of me, of wanting something so unplanned." My hand stroked slow, steady paths up and down her arm. "My life is all unplanned," I admitted. "I used to think that was a failure. Now it just feels like possibility." She tilted her head back to look at me, her eyes searching my face. The faint lines at their corners were etched deep in this light, each one a story I wanted to learn. "They'll talk, you know, my friends, people. They'll say I'm having a crisis, that you're a rebound. Let them," I said, and I meant it. The fear of judgment felt small and distant now, a faraway noise compared to the steady rhythm of her breathing. They don't get to see you like this. They don't get to see this part. A slow, real smile touched her lips then. The first one-eyed scene that held no sorrow, no shadow. It was a sunrise. She shifted, turning to face me more fully, her knee brushing against my leg. She brought a hand to my face, her touch as certain as it had been hesitant before. You see me, she said, and it was the final resolution, the core of it all. I leaned in and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her forehead. It was a promise, a beginning, a quiet seal on the choice we'd made. She sighed, a contented, heavy sound, and settled back against me, her body relaxing completely into mine. We sat like that as the night deepened, not needing to be anywhere else, not needing to be anyone else. The past was acknowledged, the future was uncertain, but the present, this quiet, tangled, perfect moment was everything. It was not a fairy tale, but something better. It was real. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?